But in a world shaped by algorithms and AI and creators, attention is obviously earned differently. So that's why we've asked Struggle 5 to come and talk about the future of digital storytelling. Sam, Jen, thank you.
Thank you. I'm very conscious of these mics. The gentleman earlier in the crowd threatened to sing with the hand mic. This is tempting.
He
This is-
actually thinks he's Britney Spears. So,
yeah.
okay, like 60 industry leaders, 60 industry leaders, 60 industry leaders. That's what's been rattling around in my head for the last week. Because when I said to Sam, okay, so who are we going to be talking in front of about storytelling? That's what he said. And I kind of thought, whoa, that freaks me out a little bit. But anyway, here we go. Good luck to us. So I am Jen. I'm the Chief Creative Officer of Droga 5 in Dublin. And this is Sam. He's the Executive Director of Droga 5, kind of more the business side of this little double act. And Droga 5, as was so, nicely introduced, is a creative agency, global, and this year it turns 20 years old. And we are renowned for building and sustaining influential brands, which is what we say. We do big storytelling campaigns that actually drive brand awareness for a lot of consumer brands and some not-for-profits, like the ones mentioned. And in our Dublin office, we also work on not-for-profits like the Samaritans and Concern and consumer brands like Lego. And what we do is, absolutely do storytelling to sort of drive eyeballs, awareness, and get response for those brands. Anyway, so that's Stroke 5, that's Stroke 5, 60 industry leaders, 60 industry leaders. And actually last night someone said, no, there's 70. I'm like, oh, great. So that's kind of been freaking me out a little back over there before I walked on. And I guess because it is a big deal from a girl from a small country town in rural Australia to come on here and talk about storytelling to all of you. How am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? And I guess I have a method to calm myself down and to sort of make me understand that this isn't the end of the world. It isn't a catastrophe. And actually, I'm going to be okay. And at the risk of getting a little too personal, I'll talk you through that method. And it's not picturing you all naked, which I know that some people do. I actually replace those words with 7 others. And brace yourself because I'm about to swear. Those words are, I'm fucked this time, aren't I, Mum? Which are the exact 7 words that my 21-year-old nephew, Rob, said nearly 10 years ago, the night he finally succumbed to the cancer he was dealt 4 years prior. He fought and won and lost and won and lost throughout those 4 years, but this was the first time he knew his time was up. And I think about that brave kid, and it makes me proud and sad, but it also makes me realize that whatever I'm about to do, whatever I'm panicking about, I'm going to be okay. This isn't the end of my world. And I tell you that story because I'm a chronic oversharer, but also because when we're talking about storytelling, the first thing that we want to really talk about today is who is telling the story absolutely matters. Getting a glimpse of the human behind the words that they're actually saying really can help lift and engage and kind of shift the dial on how that story is landing. So who is telling the story is the first chapter that we're going to talk through today. And yes, it's a really important one. And it's always mattered, but never more than now, because we are in, the age of intelligence. It's an era that's powered by AI and big data and quantum computing and robotics. So when a story comes up and it's told by like a real, live, flawed, vulnerable human, it can stand out. It can make people care, or in our vulgar headline, it can make people give a shit. So particularly when it comes to brand storytelling, the storyteller acts as that primary filter for authenticity and emotional connection, and the big one, which we've talked a lot about today, which is trust. 86% of consumers say that the key factor in supporting a brand or a cause is authenticity. And if they don't trust the storyteller, they're never going to believe the brand story, and it doesn't matter how well it's crafted. So that, and combined with what we've already heard quite a bit about today, which is this global decline in trust, it kind of makes it, there's a real vacuum, like a massive vacuum, that we would argue is kind of a good opportunity for some smart brands to fill, and in particular for you as individuals, because trust has moved from institutions to individuals. Credibility lies with the people. So leaders showing up publicly can bring that credibility layer. Your brand story is going to be much more believable if it's told by a human with actual perspective and lived experience. You know, humans who get their hands dirty, who can say, this is what I did. This was me out there, you know, collecting charity on the streets, like actually getting their hands dirty. Or even someone who stands up and shares a very painful family memory in order to relate to you. That matters in this world of AI. Leaders being storytelling, though, it's not just branding. It's actually a trust mechanism, because showing up and telling your story, it shows that you care about the people you serve, your donors, as much as you do about the cause. But remember, we are in an age where content is infinite, and Sam's going to talk quite a bit about that as well. And AI can kind of make claims cheap. So what's happened is people's bullshit detectors are on high alert. They can spot inauthenticity from a storyteller a mile off. For example, now this is personal, but I don't think that the McDonald's CEO was necessarily the best spokesperson for the mouth-watering, juicy, uber delicious, unctuous Big Arch burger, or as he called it, product. Whereas when we look at someone like Corey Marchisotto, who's the CMO of Elf Beauty, she truly believes that her role as storyteller is to personally bring the brand values to life at every touch point, rather than just talk about them. Her role of storyteller is ever present, whether she's choosing big brands to do massive collabs with, or she's approving campaigns, or backing causes, or even when she's showing up just as herself at a hotel and she whips out her Elf-branded corporate credit card, people are responding to her, the person, as if she is the brand that they know, and in this case, love. The bridge between the brand's message and the audience's belief is the storyteller. No one will even notice your story, much less care about it or give a shit about it, if that's not the right fit. So what we're going to do at the end of each of these chapters is just pose a question. We don't need to answer it. You can ponder on it, musing over lunch, if you will. So the end of this chapter, which is the first of 5, is who might your most trusted storyteller be? Over to Sam for the next chapters.
I think it'll be clear quite quick who the better storyteller is between the two of us.
Not at all. He's
Wonderful. Mine's more off
I'm
the
going to take a
cuff.
seat.
So yeah, don't fake it. I think we talked a lot about trust being fragile. You know, people are more skeptical than ever before. So they're waiting for a moment for you to trip up. And, you know, your values matter more than ever. That's what people want to see. That's what people want to believe. And layer AI on top, you know, when content is unlimited, you know, we're kind of losing the run of ourselves a little here in terms of communicating trust, if it's so easy to do so. So when content becomes abundant, how you communicate those values and show your behaviors is essential. So the content generation is abundant. This is an awful image if you really delve into it. But producing content used to signal effort. Like, it used to mean blood, sweat and tears went into something. You really mattered about the message you wanted to tell. That's gone. Creating content is easy. Everyone can do it. Everyone can sit here on a phone now, create a campaign. You can have agentic AI. You can create an end-to-end marketing plan. You can do it all. And, you know, I think people are aware of that now. Being polished is easy, you know, and you know, you can create lovely images and video that look polished and came from a professional organization or director or anything. So people are looking deeper now. Why are you creating the content you're creating? What are you trying to communicate? Are you living up to the values that I see in you? So in this world, your values are your proof. And we've talked about this lots, so I won't get into it. But, you know, people are skeptical of AI. They're skeptical of its benefit to society. They're skeptical of its impact on them. So their guards are up. They're looking for an excuse to find mistrust in you, essentially. And we'll show a couple of videos in our presentations today. But when you look at real beauty, and what Dove stand for, and that's what they stand for. That's their purpose. That's their communication platform. Everything they do is around real beauty. And when AI came along, the temptation for them is great. We can do more velocity of content. We can get more volume out. We can do way more. But they drew a line in the sand and said, no, if we start to manipulate or distort images of women, we've lost that trust we have with our audience. So in one piece of communication that we did in Sao Paulo, I'll show you this, and this is not a selling Droga 5 thing, but I think the case study gets the point across how they leaned into it for their brand.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look, and you'll see into your imagination. What we'll see will defy explanation. If you wanna view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do it. Wanna change the world, there's nothing to it. There is no life I know to compare with your imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be.
So Dove, love that soundtrack. Love that. It's really good. So when brands drift, people are going to notice. So we've got a couple of examples of where that's happening, and I think we've talked about it a little bit as well. But the Queensland Symphony Orchestra went out with an ad promote the next concert they were putting on, and you can see this is rounded edges. It's pure AI generation, but the people they represent are artists, are musicians. This was seen a total contradiction to their values. Look at Google's Gemini ad, where a dad in a loving spot decided to write a letter to his daughter's hero, but asked Gemini to write the letter on her behalf, essentially squashing her creative expression. Apple, their new iPad Pro, essentially took all the creative instruments in the world that we knew and crushed them into an iPad to demonstrate technology, what the output was from people replacing creativity. Not ideal. Big blowback. There's a couple of examples, and I think we're conscious we're not going to show, non-for-profit and charity work. We're going to show a mix, but you're probably all familiar with Charity Water. But what they do really well is, they know authenticity is a differentiator in this world. So they're looking for a way to provide proof over polish. And they've done that really well. So, give water, get proof. And they do that throughout the donor journey. And they use it as a way of being transparent through storytelling. And they make sure that's tonally reaffirmed at every step of the journey. So trust doesn't come from what you say, it comes from what you prove. And the question at the end of this chapter is, where are you using AI in your storytelling or donor experience that you wouldn't happily explain out loud? Because if you aren't, that's potentially a trust liability. That's a risk. The next thing we'll talk about is context is king. I think we're all taught that storytelling is words. Storytelling in the digital age is way more than words. It's where you're showing up. It's not just what you say. It's where it is, when it is, and how it shows up, especially what it shows up beside. So the unquotable truth, most ads and most communications from organizations are really low quality. There was a stat by System One, who are a marketing research company, who have a huge database of essentially every ad ever created, and compared it to 50%, found that 50% of ads were less engaging than a very basic video. That's essentially it, of a cow eating grass in a field. And most ads are just crap. And God knows we've been responsible for some of them. Yeah. And I think this slide kind of demonstrates a lot of what I'm talking about.
Sorry,
What-
Sam animated this slide himself, people.
A designer touched this and I said, back the F off. I'm proud of this. But that's
Not AI.
definitely not AI. But the ads aren't just crap. Where they are is crap. So only 17% of digital ads deliver the 2 seconds of attention that would take to effectively create those memory structures we all need. Not only that, but on average, 72p for every pound that we spend on media is actually seen by no one. It's wasted. It goes into the internet, no one sees it, it's low quality. So that's, you're not only creating, you could create the best content in the world, but no one's seeing it, So we'd always say, don't choose channels for reach. Choose channels for attention and credibility, and then earn your reach, is how we would recommend our clients. So, what gets talked about, what drives action, to ask yourself these questions: what am I trying to achieve and how do I achieve it? There's a few ways to do that. So borrowing trust from the medium itself. Now, some places come with trust built in. So you've got your big moments that you can announce on TV and cinema, podcasts, if you want people to delve a bit more in, that create that intimacy. And public legitimacy outdoors is a great way of doing that. They're expensive. I mean, they're cost prohibitive in many instances. But I think the point is, as the cheap media I've just shown you, it's not cheap if no one sees it. So just bearing that in mind. You can borrow trust from people. As we talked about, trust in institutions and organizations is diminishing, but trust in people is going up. And, we've talked a lot about the negativity of that as well, and insularity and people looking more closer to them and what that means and the impact it has, no doubt, on donations, etc. But it also does offer a lot of opportunities in terms of how do I show up more relevant and relatable to the people I'm trying to talk to, and borrowing that trust where people already have trust in is a great way of doing that. So, using celebrity, sports stars, creators, etc. This isn't influencer marketing. This is essentially stories carried by people who have trust already part of who they are. And I was going to talk about this longer, but I think we've talked about this to death around the experience. But, one probably most underused for brands and organizations is the one they already own. And, that's your website, your apps, your physical spaces, if you have them, the people doing the face-to-face, charity driving. These small moments matter. And everyone's familiar with Octopus Energy and Monzo, who've now got a drunk mode in terms of, adding friction into a place where they know you're probably a little vulnerable and you don't want to spend, but providing an experience that is to their benefit. There's Lemonade, who are big in the US, but they've reinvented the insurance industry in terms of their clarity and their trust they give, because they do claims really fast. I suppose my point here, the experience is great. That is absolutely critical. It is the number one thing in these moments that you need to be aware of. But these are also moments to drive home your brand story, making it feel creative, thinking about it in a really tonally strong way. That's a bit different to the rest of the category, because these are the ones people read and really reflect on. So don't see them as these just simple communication channels to be, as clear as possible. They're also channels to be a bit braver in how you talk and pull through that brand story. And the machines are now part of our story, as we've talked about. If you look at the top 2 channels that are being cited by LLMs, so your ChatGPTs, your Google AI, your Perplexities, your Claudes, Reddit and LinkedIn. That's where they're getting most of the information from at the moment. That's the top 2. So that's how people are experiencing your brand. That's how people are reviewing your brand. That's what your employees are saying about your brand. That's what your leaders are saying about your brand and where they're saying it. So if your story isn't aligned and consistent, the LLMs are going to summarize it. They're going to remix it. They're going to do all of that. So being conscious of where now people are discovering your brand, typing into their LLMs, what charity should I give to that aligns with this? You got to be sure that their place they're pulling from are accurate. So, do you need a better story or a better place to tell it? Or both? A lot of cases, it's both. My final chapter before I hand back to Jen, and there's more videos, so I can stop talking. If you get trust and context right, you know, telling that story over and over again is vital, because we're in a world where people only experience your brand, your organization in fragments. People's attention spans are gone, just the digital environment they're in. So decisions are made on partial memory now. And trust can't grow in what people won't remember, ultimately. And they'll default to what it feels familiar because there's less risk in it. And, you know, people want to feel that, you know, there's something they recognize in the brands and the people they're handing money over to. So more content doesn't achieve that. You have to tell one story, tell it well, and repeat, repeat, repeat. So they're looking for, and that doesn't mean you're throwing out the story, but they're looking for the same old thing: what you believe in, why it matters, what you do, and what proof looks like. And there's science behind this. System 1 and the IPA, who are the Institute of Practitioners for Advertisers, have shown that the brand effects, and that leads to commercial outcomes, you know, compound over time when you have a consistent message going out. You're easier to notice, you're easier to remember, you're easier to trust, and you're more likely to be chosen. And so, Specsavers, show the ad and I'll talk about it.
Oh dear, that's not good, Jess. They're my only pair. Still, duty calls. Okay, in you go. Hello, Reverend.
Should have gone to Specsavers, Pep.
So we all obviously instantly recognize that, and who does want to see Jess getting flattened by a bus, or van? So, but it's the same idea everywhere. You know, they're not telling the story in exactly the same format. They're changing per the format. So whether they're putting ads in Melbourne Airport or in Sydney Airport saying "Welcome to Melbourne," reaffirming their point, should have gone to Specsavers, or using their own property in interesting ways, using communities and creators to retell that story over and over and over again. They've now expanded out to doing it for their hearing products, and they've now done it for lenses as well. So they've recognized that having that consistent story is really important. And consistency feels boring. It isn't sexy, I think, as marketers or advertisers to us specifically, particularly when we work with creators. The urge is to change everything, to start from scratch. There's a discipline in remaining consistent. Your recognizable brand assets are integral for people remembering who you are. And too many messages, too many variations, the AI slop just put on top. There is going to be a group of organizations and brands that rise to the top because people will recognize good quality content. So, you know, this is your everywhere, but you're not actually building anything. So I'll leave you with this. If your organization told its story 5 times in 5 different places this month, would people recognize it's the same story, and would they give a shit? Jen.
Entertain or die. And then just a big roar of laughter was the sort of subhead. Because you know what's not particularly entertaining at the moment? Literally everything. Like, the world is in crisis. There are wars. People are suffering. Economies are crumbling. There are the most surreal and scary headlines. Things are pretty scary and serious. And so that, combined with what Sam's just been talking about these feeds that are just full of same old sea of sameness yawn, means that for a brand to tell a story in a way that's going to make people give a shit, like right now, being entertaining or emotionally connecting with people is definitely an option. I would argue is the option. You know, as brands, we are always trespassing on people's lives. So when we do that in an entertaining way, I'm not sure what that dance move is, but anyhow, we're showing that we get that relationship, that we respect our audience. And the thing is, we get that back because people trust what they're willing to spend time with. we always remind ourselves in our job that, and it's a real ego, flattener. Literally no one is sitting there waiting to see what we do or what we're saying or what we're selling or what cause we have. That's actually never been different. That's not new, but it's definitely more important now because the economy that brands are playing in today is an attention economy. You have to make your brand story one that people willingly spend time with, or your brand will suffer. In 2026, being worth watching is a trust advantage, but it's also a competitive edge. You're no longer just competing against your competition's cause or product or positioning. You're actually competing for how they participate in culture, how they show up in this absolutely unentertaining feeds and lives and actually do something that makes us stand up and look and be entertained. A great example of this, and we were sort of talking a little bit about COVID last night at our table, was back in 2021, post-COVID, and Mars Wrigley came out with an ad for extra chewing gum that basically captured the mood of all of us as we clawed our way out of lockdown and threw our carcasses back into the heaving thrum of life itself. We were talking about last night, and it's all coming back to me now, which is both a clue and a cue for us to hit play on the ad.
Good morning, folks. This is WGUM, your stay-at-home radio station with better music and more of it. News and weather is on the way. And this just in, we are back. We can see people again. How about that? I can't believe it. News is on the way. We'll learn more in just a moment. I can't believe it.
There were nights when the wind was so cold, but it froze in bed if I just listen to it right outside the window. I finished crying in the instant that you left, and I can't remember where or when or how, and I banished every memory you and I had ever made. Touch me like this, and hold me like that. I just got to admit that it's all coming back to me. It's all coming back, it's all coming back to me now. There were moments of gold and there were flashes of light. There were nights of endless pleasure. It was more than any loss in love. Baby, baby, if I kiss you like this, and if you whisper like that, it was lost long ago, but it's all coming back to me. If you want me like this, and if you need me like that, it was dead long ago, but it's all coming back to me. It's so hard to resist, and it's all coming back to me. I can barely recall, but it's all coming back to me now. It's all coming back to me.
So, look, when I watched that, and unsurprisingly, I have watched it quite a few times in the last couple of days, I actually remember how I felt back then when I first saw it, and I feel it all over and over again. And that entertainment, though, it's not at the expense of all the functional things about the brand. I mean, the product is there from the very beginning, I'd say 5 seconds in, and then right throughout. I mean, relevance, this isn't just a gratuitous batch of entertainment with a brand shoehorned in. I mean, when I look at it, I can almost smell those people. The need for minty fresh breath feels very, very real. And what they've done is it's just dialed up the reality of it, slapped on a Celine Dion track, personal opinion, never, ever a wrong move. And then they've told their brand story in a way that made it feel like it was all of our story, that we were all part of this one big community. And I do get it. It is chewing gum. It surely is a bit easier because it's a product that you should be able to entertain with. But in 2026, one of the key macro trends is unseriousness. People are craving a glitch. I don't know what a glitch is. They might be craving that as well. But a glitch in the glumness of the real world from every brand. Entertainment is the cost of entry. And arguably, no industry is exempt from that. In fact, I'd argue that if you're a brand that people don't really expect to be having a good time or taking yourself unseriously, that's even better. Some of the best work comes when people aren't expecting brands to kick up their heels and have fun. And I'd suggest that charities fall into that space. Very real cause, a very big job to do, and very serious consequences of your story not being heard. And then you have an audience over here that is craving entertainment, that is responding to entertainment, and is rejecting everything that looks and feels like the same stuff as everyone else. You know, how can you show them a good time and your cause through the lens of entertainment and culture? And it's not impossible, because not so long ago, Greenpeace launched their Very Real Appeal, which would actually happen to be sitting next to the Greenpeace person today, so it's quite amazing, in a very really entertaining way. So let's just take a quick look.
Rest in the hearts and minds of all who love you. May you rest in peace.
Rest? Nah. Not when there are plastic polluting, tree chopping, oil spilling corporations plundering our planet. See, us dearly departed left a parting gift.
One which means we can still defend our oceans, even when we're scattered in them.
Fight back on climate change when we've bitten the dust. Bless you. And protect our natural habitats when we're worm food.
Thanks. So, from our decaying corpses
to every destructive corporation.
You haven't heard the last of us.
Now, it's only just recently out.
Little help.
So there are no results yet, but we're standing by for greatness. Just because the product is serious doesn't mean the story has to be. And obviously, when it comes to this entertainment first thinking, I know that the examples that I've shared today have been both quite lighthearted, but you actually have the whole rainbow of emotions that you can tap into when you're trying to make a connection. I mean, Cadbury have been the masters of playing with our emotions for years. Every time you watch something from Cadbury, it doesn't matter whether you're young or old, or even if you don't like chocolate, you feel something at an instinctive level. That's because they tell the same story every time, like Sam's just talked about, in a way to trigger heightened feelings of kindness and generosity and joy. And they're not just doing that to entertain us or for shits and gigs. They're doing it because it's actually an economic multiplier. Attention is brutally scarce. So when you earn it, the value of what you've spent to create it increases because the effectiveness and the reach of your content's gone up. When stories are at their best, they can insulate your brand from volatilities in the market and are a real growth engine for your business. So while entertain or die was our headline, and it might sound a bit drastic, what we're saying is that storytelling done right, storytelling that entertains, is what can help you transcend from what should be table stakes to a bit more of this gravity-defying space. You know, a brand that sustains growth and continues to grow, you know, or a brand, as what we said, doesn't die. So the question that we posed at the end of this final chapter was, you know, when you're thinking about your story, would your husband, wife, partner, kids, whoever, just politely nod along when you share it? Or would they genuinely love to hear it? Now, I could keep talking about entertaining and storytelling for a while, but I can't because it's been a ding. So hopefully what you get today in the age of intelligence, where so much of what people are watching, seeing, doing, learning is actually being chosen for them by technology and created for them by technology, is that trust is one of the hardest things to build, but that storytelling is one of the most powerful tools to build it. Sam and I are lucky. We work on some big brands and some big causes, and we both have very different jobs. And everyone in our agency and everyone in our, we all have very, very, very different jobs to do. But the one thing that we always get reminded of, and we remind ourselves of, is we actually have one job to do. That's to tell our client's brand story in a way that makes people care. So when you're telling your story, literally whenever you're showing up and saying something or doing something, you are the brand. So ask yourself as the storyteller, am I saying this or doing this in the most human way possible? Are my values, my real values, coming through loud and clear? Am I showing up in the right spaces and places? And am I telling that one killer story over and over again? And my God, am I being entertaining? And if you're saying yes and you're doing all that, then you are giving yourself, your cause, your brand, and your brand story the very best possible chance it has for people to care about it, or as we crudely say, for people to give a shit. Thank you.